All right, I'm kind of excited about talking to you guys about this tool. This is one of the only things, because I've spent my career as a sysadmin, it's one of the only scripts that I've ever written that other people have used and actually liked. So I wanted to share it with you and get your thoughts and opinions on it. So first off, I wanted to start with a trigger warning. I'm going to be talking about Elasticsearch, and I'm going to be talking about Perl. And I know both of those things probably have some sort of violent emotional response from you. So if you find yourself triggered, remember this pattern. Inhale through your nose for 4 counts, hold that for 7 counts, and then exhale slowly through your mouth for 8 counts. Trust me, it works. So the first thing that you're asking yourself is, why would I want to do this? Why would I want to bring Elasticsearch into my terminal? It's holy. It's where I do stuff. I don't want that crowding out my terminal. Plus, we already have Kibana. Kibana has a great user interface. It's developed by Elastic, very close to Elasticsearch. So the capabilities that we have there are expressive of how Elasticsearch is meant to be used by the people who create it. For me, I've always found Kibana a little bit too clunky and a little bit too slow to get my ideas effectively out in a time span that makes it worth sharing. Like with Grafana, I can very quickly express the ideas that I want out in a dashboard that's customizable by people, that they can reuse elements from my dashboard very easily, and it just feels like a more natural workflow for me. But the downside to this is when we talk about actual logging data in Grafana, I don't feel like it's really reached a point where it's usable in a browser. I may argue, but that may just be me, because I'm going to argue that logs don't belong in browsers anyways. And of course, we have Loki or whatever these days. The support for Elasticsearch is there now in the Grafana Explorer tab, but it's not really on par with what Loki can do, and I don't think it ever will be. There's not as much incentive for the Loki support and the Elasticsearch support to maintain 100% functional capacity. Plus, this is still in the browser. And you may have experienced this, but how many scroll bars do we have as viewports change? We have the scroll bars on the browsers, we have scroll bars in the DOM, in the JS, and you add touch gestures into that, and I'm losing my mind, and I can't even highlight the word that I want to highlight. Again, why are we going to drag terminal into this nasty mess? We already have curl and JQ for doing stuff with JavaScript and JSON. And are there people right now that use Elasticsearch from the command line with curl and JQ at all? Yeah, I mean, it works, but I don't like editing JSON in a terminal. It's just not my idea of fun. A wise man once told me, you have a limited number of keystrokes before you die. Use them wisely. I'm just really bad with GUIs, and that may just be my fault, and this may all just be my crazy paranoia, but I'm just not good with GUIs. Anytime a mouse is involved, it's like my father who's 65 and never used a computer through his whole career, is sitting at a terminal. I just don't know what to do. Browser is not a workspace. I've never been effective in the browser. I see things like Slack as massive backslides in portability and compatibility and openness. I run Firefox as the browser with so many security and privacy extensions that even when I turn them all to permissive, there's about maybe 20% of the web that I am completely unable to view. It just sits there as a blank screen. And I'm not willing to compromise on that, so I will not use your site if it doesn't work with those things. Oh, neat. Sorry about that. Downside to using a corporate computer. Well, we're going to see, hopefully we'll see more of that. It actually killed Keynote. There it is. Okay. Browsers are bloaty and slow. They started out pretty simple, but over the years, the capabilities of the browser has grown really without any type of constraint. So this makes them also prone to distraction. Right now, right before I left for this conference, I actually had to go through and do some tab house cleaning. Does anyone else do tab house cleaning every once in a while? I had 85 open tabs. Now, most of those are related to work projects or documentation for work-related things that I'm working on, but does anyone else use pin tabs in Chrome or yeah, and like what happens if you get a new email message in Gmail? Where does that notification pop up? Well, if you listen to Corey's talk, it's popping up in one of the most important areas in our visual field, the top left corner of the browser. These things are super distracting, and they're not going to help you get your work done. my command line is my workspace. I have my choice of shell. I have my choice of dot files, which I'm very opinionated about. And I have and will heavily customize the shell to my workflow to limit the number of keystrokes it takes me to get from point A to point B. There's a rich ecosystem of command line utilities that are available in any Unix-based system or any POSIX compliant system so that you can do things really fast. I had a friend who interviewed once and asked to sort a list of a text file the most efficient way, and he said I would pipe it through sort, and they told him no, and he's like, well, let me explain to you why sort is the best utility for this. It's really well thought out. There's a lot of really great work there. There's a lot of expertise already available in the terminal. Plus, you have access to your favorite programming language in its interpreter. And besides like MUDs or NetHack, there's not really a lot of distractions in my terminal. So my terminal is where I work, and it's what pays my bills. And aside from just disdain towards GUIs, there's some other things that have really informed my decision to work in my terminal. The first one, I've already said this, there's a finite number of keystrokes you have before you die, so use them wisely. I would add my corollary, which is there's a finite distance you can mouse or gesture before you die, use it wisely. The Unix philosophy is something that I'm kind of disappointed to see kind of being backed away from these days. It's really important to me, especially the third corollary is probably the most important one to me, and it shaped my entire career and made me who I am today. And that's favor the creation of tools over like one-off little hack jobs. Don't just do a whole bunch of pipes on the command line. I mean, do a whole bunch of pipes on the command line, but eventually turn that into a script. Because I've been trying to automate myself out of a job since 1999, and my backlog is longer now than it was when I started in 1999. So I'm not doing a very good job, but I am working on more challenging things. Interoperability and openness is a really big part of just what the pipe operator is in Unix. It's afforded us to do so much. It's very important to think about, as I develop this new tool, that the output of my tool could be used as input to the next tool, and because of that, it could be a part of something really great. And the other thing is, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants up here. A lot of the great work in the command line has been done, and it's the reason that I'm able to accomplish what I'm able to do is because of this interoperability and openness. This may shock you, but I'm not ashamed to say that I love Perl. I've been using it professionally for 20 years. It dominated the 90s due to its ease of use and ubiquity. It was everywhere. It was easy to use. And it's actually, if you've talked to Larry Wall and you understand how the language was designed, he wanted the language to mimic the sloppiness and unpredictability of natural language. That gave it a really unique feature set, which was that it grew with you. You could write bad Perl, and there's a lot of really bad Perl out there, but you can also write very expressive, very well-documented, very performant code without like hurting your wrists a lot. Again, limited number of keystrokes, so think about it. Data exploration is something that I really learned when I was working at Booking. Being able to ask data stores arbitrary questions and being able to transform that data and pipe it to the next step and map reduce and all of that stuff. When I design a tool, I think about the specific purpose that I want to use it for, and then I abstract that out to how might someone else use this tool. It's the most important thing that you can have in a tool or an ecosystem for finding meaning in data. It's why Perl was successful. It's why Graphite was successful, even if you're not a fan of it. The explorability of the data, and it's the reason why Elasticsearch is so incredibly successful. It's easy to ask arbitrary questions. And I did see the power of Elasticsearch early. But it wasn't very command line friendly or ops friendly. I was maintaining a very, 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 very fragile, but very, very, very profitable Elasticsearch cluster at Booking.com when it was 0.17. Did anyone get a chance to work with that version of Elasticsearch, 0.17 and earlier? The way I can describe it is splody. It would break constantly, and there's no curator, there's no marvel there, there's no introspection, except Shai did a really great job of incorporating those statistics into Elasticsearch so you could introspect in, but there was nothing to get that data out. I was on call for Elasticsearch, and I wanted to be able to know before things went south so that I could drink nice Belgian beers and not have to worry about getting woken up in the middle of the night. So I did a Perl. There are so many outages that we needed to do something, and Shai and his team were primarily focused on improving the stability of the ecosystem. So we wrote some tools to integrate it with Nagios, to integrate it with Graphite, to do things like index maintenance that you now do with Curator, to age off old indexes, to optimize indexes, all of that stuff. And I built it in a functional way because I was dealing with sysadmins, and object-oriented is a little bit challenging for some people that have spent most of their life doing shell. I wanted it to be accessible so that other tools could evolve out of the same tool set, and we could all speak the same language, the same command line switches, and all of that stuff. And because I did that, I realized very quickly that I could then leverage those same utilities to start introspecting into the data that was actually inside of the cluster. So ESUtils was born, and it contains scripts for monitoring, maintenance, some basic status information, and it makes some assumptions. First off, it attempts to be as version agnostic as possible. So I haven't tested it in a long time, and I only removed some very small stub steps that were needed, but I'm pretty sure the utilities all still work against 0.16 all the way through 7.3. I haven't tested on 7.4 yet, but there's no reason to think that it wouldn't work there. We assume kind of like daily indexes, but if you're doing hourly indexes or something like that, the utility will still work with it without any modifications or whatsoever. But if you are using like a different pattern for index naming, it may need some tweaks. And if you're interested in using it and you have an index format that's not supported, reach out to me. I'm happy to add support for those things. And so this talk is going to be about one of the utilities in the distribution, and that is Elasticsearch. This is Perl. These days, Perl has all the cool tricks that all the other languages have. You can install a localized version of Perl in your home directory, and you can set yourself up to use it. And then installing the utility is as simple as doing this. Once you have it installed, we can talk about what we can do with it. So the first thing that any good sysadmin knows is that the answer to every question is RTFM. I started this from the idea that I wanted other people to be able to use this, and one of the most effective ways that you can make your tool accessible to people that aren't you is to, instead of hiding everything behind like power user switches, is to document everything the tool can do and include examples. Include examples of how you would use the tool and what output you would expect to see when you passed it these parameters. So that's exactly what I did. Help is just a quick overview, and it's not very quick, but there's a lot of switches available to use on the command line. And then the manual is actually an in-depth explanation of what each one of those switches does with examples of how it's used and what you might expect when you use them. Okay, this is like double black diamond level live demo for me because I'm doing the split screen thing here. I've got a TMUX session that's shared, which should work, but this keyboard is crap, and I wasn't intending on presenting on this keyboard, so bear with me. Let's see if we can get the... Oh yeah, then the Wi-Fi exploded. We call that the Lhotsky effect at work. Hardware does not respond well to me. They keep me away from it. Okay, so now if I go over to here, go to this, then go back here to this. Okay, that part works, but why is it doing that? Oh, I know why. Okay, so mouse back over to here, and we'll do. Okay, is this legible to people? Can they kind of make it out? This is more about what we're going to do here than about reading any individual word. Okay, so actually let me go up another few levels there. Okay, so Elasticsearch, we can take a look. Like I said, this is going to be very spewy. There's a lot of command line switches. This is built on several layers of reusable code that provide all kinds of really cool functionality. And then there's also the manual, which gets more into depth about what these options are and what they do. So we have the restatement of all the options, and then as we go down, we'll get a description of some example use cases of how you might use this tool to look for data in your logs, and then a breakdown of all the options and some example use cases for each one of those options. Additionally, one of the things that I bumped into very early on with this tool was expressing some of the concepts that I wanted to express in Lucene query syntax were either kludgy or prone to error in our community of users. So I started an extended syntax for Lucene to make the query syntax easier to access for people. And it includes a breakdown of all of those plugins and how they work and what they do as well. So there's a lot of documentation in here, and basically this is a tour as quickly as I can until I run out of time of some of the stuff that you can do with ESSearch.pl. So let's go back to over here and push this button. So that's the kind of help overview. That's the RTFM section. You'll want to connect to your cluster. The defaults are connect to localhost port 9200. It's going to use the REST API for Elasticsearch. If you need to override one of those, you can do that. But I'm all about minimizing keystrokes, and that's a lot of stuff to have to put on your command line. Makes it ugly. I don't like ugly. So it has its own dot files where you can specify things like the host, the port, the protocol, the HTTP basic username, and then you can have it shell out to a command, so you don't have to store your password in a plain text file on your server. Some helpful notes about the ecosystem is that searches are constrained by calendar date in the index name by default. You can use things like --days7 to open your scope up to 7 days. Searches will stop once they receive the number of results that you've requested. The default is 20. Again, this is based on a Splody version of Elasticsearch. I'm slowly rolling back some of these to make them more permissive, but Splody versions of Elasticsearch did not like you requesting hundreds of pieces of data at once. If you really wanted to, and I used to have a caution in front of this, but now it's no longer scary or terrifying, you can use --all and it will initiate a scrolled search and give you all of the matches that match across your entire time span. Sort order is descending by default on the timestamp field, and you can override that with ascending if you'd like to. And then if you wanted to use these utilities with other types of indexes, you can specify the index name on the command line like that, and you can run these things that way. Okay, so now you've got the thing all installed. You're happy. You've read the documentation because that's what everyone does the first time they get a piece of new hardware or software. So they read all the documentation. They're super happy about it. So you want to start exploring your data. Now, this is actually communicating with a server in Germany, so over an SSH tunnel. So there's a chance that this will be a little bit slow or will blow up in my face. But let's see if it'll work. We operate on the concept of index base names under the assumption that like data will be in like index names. So we can kind of like grab all those indexes, figure out what fields you have available to you, and do some cool stuff. So if I want to know which base names are available in a cluster, you can use this --bases command, and it will go out and collect all the indexes that are relevant to your search time and give you a list back. Oh, cool. Those are the ones that work. I'm not supposed to be on the VPN. Let me change that right quick. So if I change this back to localhost here, but you can see this is what I have stored right now in the production cluster, kind of addressable base names in the indexing. And now my connection is refused. Let's exit that. Do this. Okay, so now if I do this, in theory, I should get, okay, cool. This is the data set that I wanted to show. This, I only have one index. I'm pulling data out of syslog. You can see that it's looking through, and it found 62 indexes that contain this base. So it's going to take all those fields and compress them all down and figure out exactly what I'm able to do with that. So the next thing I might want to do is figure out what's available to me in that index base. So I can say base syslog and give it a flag for showing me fields. So now it's going to collect the data from all the fields that are in scope, and it's going to list the fields with the data types and tell me, give me a summary at the very end about what the data points that are there are available to me. So you know, one of the things that looks interesting to me off the bat is status. Is like, what is status? So I'm going to jump ahead here because that's what I always do. And say base syslog and show me what the top status is. Just by saying --top status. So I'm just going to like what's in this index? What do I have to work with here? And so now I get a list of the statuses that are available to me, which might inform, what I want to find out is like, what does a failure document look like? So I can say status failure, and you've all probably worked with Lucene query syntax and seen this type of thing. So I get a YAML document, and that's not exactly like what we're used to in the logging world. We're used to seeing log lines, right? And YAML is kind of, well, it's better than JSON because, if we were to do JSON here, we could do --JQ, and this assumes that you're going to take this output and send it to JQ. So it removes all the decorations. Oops, not that way. Not that one. This one. So it removes all the decorations, and it will just output the JSON blobs. But again, this isn't very user-friendly. That's not how we're used to reading the data from our logs. I happen to know a little bit about this index since I created it. So I can say things like, well, I want to see it like syslog would show it to me. So give it to me, give me the host name, give me the program, and give me the message. And this comma-separated list is then going to be shown in tabular fashion. So now I can do this. And now you're like, oh, this is cool. I really love this. It's making me feel like it's 1999 again. But Brad, I really want to be able to watch log files as they fly by because nothing beats watching a log file. So you can ask it to tail, and it will actually tail the log files. And for those people in your organizations that for some reason or another will never grip onto those fancy graphs and lines, they can watch this and tell you what's going on in your infrastructure. Okay, I think that's kind of what I wanted to do here. Let's see if we can jump back in. I don't have much more time. I found out that there's a lot of fun stuff about this that I wanted to talk about. It needs to detect timestamp fields. You can specify timestamp with --timestamp, or you can put it into the ESUtils thing. Oh, but if you have more than one index base name, and these slides got cut off, but you can see that you can add a meta and say any logstash indexes, they use timestamp at timestamp instead. It's just a hint. It will detect if there's only a single timestamp in the index, it'll tell you, hey, I detected that this is the timestamp I'm going to use. If there's more than one, it'll fail. And it'll tell you, I found these, it'll list every single timestamp field it found and say, you need to pick one to make your query work. You can affect size using --size, so if you just want to see what's up, kind of covered this. And of course, Lucene query syntax, right? This is really clunky to me, having to use and, because I can't tell you how many times myself or a colleague used and lowercase, and then the search results were bananas. Or they completely forgot the and, because this is developed from the perspective of a incident response team, so you're constantly adding new information into the things that you're building. So I wanted to do the thing that I expected it to do all the time. So there's some optimization. So first off, the first optimization is you don't need the word and at all. It will automatically join based on and. You can change that using --or, but I've never come across an instance where this is what anyone ever wanted, but that's the default in Lucene. The JQ thing does that. I'm going to skip through the live demo to kind of show some of these things here, and any extra time I have, I will do some weird stuff with Elasticsearch. Not and or will automatically be promoted to uppercase. You can use CIDR notation with IP addresses. If it texts an IPv4 or IPv6 address designation, it will automatically expand it to a range query. You can do range queries using the normal operators you would expect. You have to shell quote them because the shell will interpret that as a redirect. If you need an exact match, and have you ever tried to escape a Lucene query that was user agent or a file somewhere? It's madness. And you add the command line in that, you need to double escape. So rather than deal with that, I said, let's back away. If you prefix a term with an equal sign, it will automatically promote it to a terms filter so that you won't have to deal with any type of escaping. If you want to prefix something, you can say, show me all the user agents that start with go. And then let's say you have a text file of stuff that you want to search for in JSON or CSV or tab-separated data. You can actually just reference that I want to look for all the source IP data that's in the last column of the .dat file. The .dat will be tab delimited, so it'll look for the last column of the tab delimited file, and it will grab all those source IPs, unique them, and then build a terms query for you automatically. You want it in the first column instead? That's cool, we got you. Use array syntax to get that data out. It also works with CSVs. I've got JSON data because I work in security and we get threat feeds in JSON. So if you have a JSON threat feed, you can actually access the data in the JSON documents, assuming they're new line delimited JSON, via their key space, which is kind of cool, and you build these queries up. And yeah, I kind of showed some of the aggregation stuff already. There are some caveats. This was developed during Explodey Elasticsearch. So there's some limitations that I placed on this because I blew up the cluster like 40 times a day just looking for stuff, and then my colleagues got involved, and it was basically a melting mess of unusability for a while. So you're only allowed to aggregate inside of 1 day's container, 1 calendar day's container. You're limited to 2 levels deep, except in one special case, which is an interval where you index on time. And this is what they look like. So if I want to show the top 50 or the top URIs where I'm getting any type of server-side error, I would get the top 20 with the first one, and then I can change that size with those flags. If I wanted to look at it by hour, I could say interval hour. It'll add a date histogram into the aggregation. I can do a second level of aggregation, so give me the top URI with each source country. Defaults to the top 3, again, because of exploding Elasticsearch. But you can change that by adding a colon and listing the number of the sub-aggregation that you'd like. You want to search by cardinality, you can say by cardinality source country. You want to include sum and sort by sum, you can do that. You can combine these things together so that you can build these complex queries. You can sort by average render milliseconds to get a statistical overview of everything inside of that bucket. Percentiles are there because some of us use percentiles occasionally. Oh, histograms, got you too. That'll create a histogram with 100 millisecond buckets and give you the output of that. You want to use significant terms instead to be able to introspect some more data out of your cluster. You can do that as well. I'm sorry, this other thing got cut off. This is all built with CLI helpers. One of the cool things about CLI helpers is that I can say -- data file equals output.dat. And it will output a tab separated list of data, which I can then use in my next query as an input into the next search term. And if you're like me and you're sharing these results constantly with people, if you use app no paste and install that as well, and you can use -- no paste and it will automatically paste to your internal paste buffer and send you the URL so that you can drop it into your team's channels. It will not paste to a public paste channel unless you specify -- no paste - public. It will only allow you to paste data from your cluster to a paste adapter that's flagged as private. Yeah, so that's kind of that. So here's an example where we're looking for anything in a threat list, an IP in a threat list that accessed the admin page that got a status other than less than 400. We send that to inside the house.dat, and then we have all those IP addresses, and we can look at every single thing that those things have done, and then send that into a no-paste channel, maybe use that as part of your incident response. And future plans, arbitrary levels of nested aggregation, JSON output for aggregations, better support for nested documentation, nested documents, and I'm working on a plugin that will allow you to join at query time, reverse DNS, MySQL, and other data sources. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for being a little bit over, but that was fun.